Well, hello everybody. Good morning from Mystery Island Studio here in Southern Maryland on the East Coast of the USA, where it's 11:02 a.m. And thank you for joining me for a Friday chat. I see we're up to Friday chat number 11, according to Jumping Mouse, who keeps our calendar over at screamingospreys.com. And we are in the middle of doing some work at screamingospreys.com to bring our Screaming Ospreys TV show back active. Haven't loaded anything in a couple of months, but I think it's time to renew that resource for you. And other than that, how are you all doing today? Happy Friday to those of us for whom it is Friday, and hello to folks wherever you are. Thanks for being with us here at McDuff Lives. I've renamed the channel McDuff Lives 1, so now we have McDuff Lives 1, McDuff Lives 2, and McDuff Lives 3. And for the record, I am now broadcasting on Facebook as well. Some folks, a few hundred people, I think, are aware of that. And so the Facebook audience will probably start to grow as I am adding that to my daily broadcasts. Well, it's June the 17th, and that makes me very, very happy because 16 years ago today, I got married to a drummer, and we are having a very, very quiet day together. We may go out to Fredericksburg to have a little something to eat together, but it's very hot out there, and we may just decide to stay at home. At any rate, it's a good, happy day for us, and I hope it's a happy day for you too. Good morning, Jimmy Beam and Corky Robert Kovacs, first in this morning, and Christy Liebel, close second behind. Colleen is here, and yeah, thanks, Robert. Have a little sip of coffee while we get settled here. All right. Mercy, mercy, do, re, mi. I don't know that one, Audrey Smith. Explain that to me. What does that mean? Thank you, Mike. And Nadia. All right. Um, so let me open up the floor right away. I got a lot on my mind, but like I say, I like it when you guys contribute whatever you want to talk about. So let me start off with Robert Kovacs and give you the floor for a moment. Robert, have you got anything on your mind this morning besides eek? I think that's what you said when you met your bride. Okay, mercy, mercy, do, re, mi. That sounds like a good one. I like it. And okay, any thing you want to talk about Robert Kovacs? I don't know if that's fair or not, but I thought I'd just pick on you because you were the first one. The die-off of cows. Okay. It is crazy, and I haven't studied it, so I need maybe somebody else in the chat room can tell us what's the latest intelligence on the cow mystery. Of course, we've had these massive animal deaths. Remember when they had some with, well, Bill Cooper's book talks about them doing radiation testing on herds of animals, and then they would come and take out the part that they wanted to test, usually the tongue, the throat, uh, the hooves, the part that would have been in contact with the radiated uh, um, fodder that they're eating and walking on. So, oh, we also do have birds dying, don't we? And that of course, is they're going to scare us with some type of a bird flu again. Then somebody said this morning that it's going to be It's going to be anthrax released from the melting ice cap on the North Pole. Okay, and that one to me is beyond belief. No, I don't believe it. But the trouble is that there's enough people out there that are addicted to this narrative that they'll believe it. They believe in monkeypox. They believe in, yeah. And I did note that they changed the name of monkeypox to something else in order to avoid people discovering, which we all already know, that there was a game, an exercise, a tabletop exercise conducted almost mathematically exactly a year behind the supposed appearance of monkeypox, now to be renamed to something rather obscure, so we all forget about it. But they had to rename it because people would look it up, and if you looked it up, you'd run into because there's nothing else on the internet, you'd run into the monkeypox study that was conducted in spring of 2021, last year, by the same people that conducted the studies of the you know what. So anyway, the credulity of American public and the world, and Europe is the same. They're very credulous. They've been molded into this mind, mass formation mind. Yeah, I think that's a good term. I think that, excuse me, little allergies going on here. Let's see. All right. No, I haven't really studied the cow thing, but it certainly does seem to be crazy. Um, Love Jeffrey Prather. I like to watch him, and I learned more from him than I would from having him on the show. So I encourage everyone to watch Jeffrey Prather, though. He's quite an expert. Corky Goss. Smash your face on the tabletop exercise. Okay. I mean, it is a smack your forehead moment when you realize, oh my, they've just done another scenario. You know how there's always some exercise going on at the same time? Always. In the 9/11 scenario and the Paris thing a few years ago, these training exercises coincide with real things. Jimmy Beam, I've been told by someone that they are spraying the skies to hide the nebula or some kind of earth tilt that's taking place. This is one of the most difficult subjects that you can run into right now, and what's going on in the sky. Anybody that's as old as I am knows that what's going on in the sky is not normal sky. It's just weird. Um, for one thing, even though we always were expecting jets to have contrails, we never expected them to linger over the sky for hours and hours and spread out and fall uh, to Earth in almost visible ways. We never expected the amount of these contrails to be streaking all across the skies, depending upon what they what their intention is. You may get bombarded with streaks of this stuff, or you may not see any for weeks. But when you see it, you see it. It's like, wow, how can they do that? And I'm very fascinated by the approach of this by actual airline pilots, because you would think if there was something going on up there that was dangerous, that the airline pilots would see it and say, "Hey, this is dangerous. We should alert the public and stop this stuff." But no, every time I talk to somebody that knows about flying from the pilot's point of view, and people that have flown military aircraft for careers, people that fly commercial aircraft for their careers, and they will say, no, there's not a chemtrail button. That's all false. That's all disinformation. And when they observe what's coming out the tail end of their plane, they're quite convinced that it's just hydrocarbons. It's just burned up fuel and it's going to dissipate. And they're not at all worried about it. But then you think about what's going on above that layer. And this is my thought, okay? And I'm just rambling now. I'm not looking at the chat. I'm up in my head thinking this through with you. Perhaps they've engineered commercial planes to generate these long-lasting contrails simply as camouflage, so that we don't see what's going on above that layer, where they probably have some unmarked planes. You hear about these white planes that are impossible to see, that are really from the UN or something like that, and that they're way up there dropping the real stuff, the metallic stuff that allows them to steer storms with radar. This is the mechanics that I think you all need to know. I mean, we all need to think about and this is Elena Friedland's work and her life's work, and I endorse her work in describing the construction of a prison planet by ionizing the sky. It's engineering on a global scale to change our neutral sky, which doesn't have electrical qualities, it's neutral, to dump nanoparticles of aluminum, which is what One Pacific Redwood calls it. He says that's nanoparticles of aluminum and other stuff, I'm sure. But the thing that isn't aluminum poisonous? Didn't we learn that in grade school? But that doesn't stop them from doing what they're going to do, either with medicine or with controlling the environment. But if they can get enough of this metallic material into the upper atmosphere, aerosolized, right? And let it just linger there until they need another dump from another flight of planes, then that aerosolized part of the sky can be heated or cooled by radiation. And if you heat a part of the sky, then that, of course, raises the air pressure. And if you do that, you can then steer a hurricane away from the country, in the case of Florida or the coast, the East Coast, or toward the country, in the case of New Orleans and Katrina. And I've also observed this because One PR, his channel focuses more on the West Coast and the Pacific, but you can see how these hurricanes are like heading right for Hawaii, and then at the last minute they just zig and zag around it. And he says, it has to do with the derivatives market, that there's a weather derivatives market where you can bet on whether a hurricane is going to hit a particular place or not. And other, things. Is there going to be a drought? Is there going to be a flood? Well, if you have control over the sky by electrifying it, as Elena Friedland has published in her books, then you can steer those storms. And it's not just for military purposes. No, this is because water is as expensive as gasoline. Water is precious. And if you can create what they're calling rivers in the sky, there never was rivers in the sky, but they're creating them. If you watch the satellite maps that you can see on GOES East, GOES-EAST, or others that are published by NASA and NOAA, and JPL and various universities around the world, you can see the patterns. And this is where my old friend correspondent, uh, uh, what's his name, Gilgamesh. Gosh, what's the other guys? Those gods from Mesopotamia. He calls himself uh, Enkidu Gilgamesh, right? Well, if you look at his channel, it's called Geoarchitecture, but it's in German, so it doesn't have the last E. It's GeoArchitectur, and I think that's .com or .de. But his work is really outstanding on this issue, and he shows how the water is ultimately being carried along these rivers to places where they want to irrigate for desert farming or for fracking. So that if you see that we've had a drought in California for 30 years and all of us, but there's an awful lot of fracking going on in Texas, then you start to wonder, well, maybe they've steered the water away from California into Texas or in Oklahoma to feed the water needs of their fracking operations. Maybe. I think that is a very likely idea. And then you look at all of the manipulation over in the European side and how a lot of rain suddenly starts to be showing up in Saudi Arabia. And their desert farming operations are growing like crazy. You can see them on satellites. I've done it on my show. It was one of my first deep dives, other than working with George, was when I started to share some of my work trying to understand why are these crazy looking clouds and things up in the sky. So you got me started, Jimmy. Thank you for that. And now I'll check back and see what you guys are saying. Let's see. I'm going to go way back because I've been talking for a while and roll forward. Here we go. Yeah, stealth contractor graft. It sounds very likely. Mike Panzer says the chemtrails are a massive spray-on antenna. Well, that's pretty much what I'm saying. But I think that it's not the ones we see. I think it's the next layer up. That's my speculation in order to accommodate the fact that our airline pilots are not afraid of this stuff. Um, let's see. Yeah, constant and massive thunderstorms. That's again, you see, if you have like two bodies of air, one is cooler than the other, like right, okay, and you say, oh, I am going to transport. This one has all the water in it, okay, so I want to get this one in the water with the water. I want to lift it up into the atmosphere so it doesn't fall and carry it across the Atlantic Ocean, down across Europe, and dump it into Saudi Arabia. That's what I want to do. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to manipulate this other one. I'm going to heat this one up so that this one has to go where I tell it, right? Because he's a low pressure because he's got all the water, so he wants to dump the water, but I'm not going to let him dump the water until he gets to where I want him to dump it. That is your basic Walt Disney movie from 1956 or 7 or whenever it was, and you can see it how they say, hey, there's a hurricane coming and it's going to hit Florida. Hello, beams, send the beams. And they send the beams down, and that heats up the path that they wanted to steer away from, and so it doesn't go there, and instead it goes out to sea and fizzles out, and everybody gets to keep their condos on the beach for another hurricane season. Well, you guys got me started. I haven't talked about this in a year or so, but I do absolutely believe that they are manipulating our sky and that it has to do more with profiting from the water than from anything else. But the side effect of it is we're getting dumped with aluminum. What does that have to do with our medical problems that we're encountering? Well, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to get another YouTube strike. I just took the legend off of my channel that said, that the channel one is inactive. I have one active strike, which gives me one more before I'll have to go inactive again. But let's try not to get one because I need to reach people. Honestly, I love having, what do we have, 54 people chatting with us right now. But frankly, I want my story out more, and I don't know how to, I'm not a marketing person, but eh, you guys are are so important as ambassadors of the McDuff message, I guess, if I can put it that way. The What I mean by the McDuff message is to, let's get back to American values. I was I came up with this little acronym the other day, if I just ramble for a minute. Um, and it goes like this: GRSST. Gerst. Gerst. And what is it? What does it mean? It means the golden rule, GR plus sic semper tyrannis. Thus, always to tyrants. I think in a way that is expressing the general idea of American values that McDuff and I, we seek to preserve and protect and defend. And it really has to do with individual choices to be good. The individual choice to treat each other with respect and dignity as we would like to be treated. And that does not have anything to do with race or color or language you speak or how tall you are or whether you're pretty or not. It has to do with a basic approach to life, the golden rule. However, what do you do when you are stuck in some dictatorship with no hope? Well, one thing you can do is you can pray. And one thing that people have hung on to in our country is this idea of thus always to tyrants. Which doesn't mean that I have to draw the sword and kill the tyrant. That's not what it means. It means that tyrants always lose. They always are conquered by the inherent sense of justice that humanity possesses. They cannot prosper as tyrants. Is that one of the big lessons of history, that every tyrant will fall? I mean, look at Alexander the Great. How long did he live? A year? Henry V, the great Victor of Agincourt, the famous Shakespearean play, the hero, dead within a year or two after attaining the crown. Well, what is it worth, really, to go to war on behalf of, say, the church, like Henry V did? Did the Catholic Church want us to go to war in Vietnam to support their man GM and the horrific division of that country, the destruction of the civilization in the South and the North, and the transportation of 500,000 Northerners who had no business in the South, completely different culture, just dumped them there in order to create conflict. You know, Ed Lansdale, his whole way of life is creating conflict. So many of our historical events have been caused by some agent provocateur, such as Lansdale, one of the great provocateurs of all time. Let's see. Huh. Win Tai says, let me check the Patreon. I guess I'm missing a little part of your conversation. I've been up in my head expounding on my ideas there for you. But look, James Corbett a few years ago was investigating the chemtrails, and he kind of had the idea along what I'm saying that these are not the visible planes; these are up higher. But you know what I need to see? And who was it? Okay, poly walnuts, aluminum oxide, barium, selenium, right? Strontium is another one they say, and it shows up in the rainwater, right? But then the answer comes back is, well, there's trace amounts of everything in the air, so everything's going to show up in that rainwater. Now, how do you answer that? And what I need is for somebody to go up in a balloon, okay, into one of these clouds and grab some of it and take it to a lab and analyze it. And why hasn't that been done yet? I want to know, all of these people, the big weather channels, the big people with hundreds of thousands of followers that claim to be experts on chemtrails. Why haven't they been able to finance a balloon or some other way, maybe a drone at this point to just fly up into the darn stuff and grab some of it and take it to a lab? And that to me is the final answer. If there's a bunch of aluminum sitting in these contrails, then I think we've got a big, big problem. Yeah, Dane Wigington is his name, Wigginton. I'm not sure that I can accept what Dane Wigington says if he hasn't done that experiment. There's a lot of things that he says and does that are, well, people have called attention to it. Let's just leave it there. So I don't follow him. But I haven't really been following the issue for about a year or so. As you know, I spent some time reading a book by a young taxi driver from California. Um, and he had put together a whole lot of good information. But I think he needs to get back and try to think of his conclusions again, because his conclusions didn't make any sense to me. So we're still investigating, what's going on in our sky. But if it's aluminum, that's bad news, bad for our health, for our brains. It's poisonous. Don Lovell says it's an invasion by stealth to the brain. It locks up your brain, attack by personal means. And I'm sure that they're trying to do that. I don't know if they've succeeded, but when you create something like DARPA and give it the mission of thinking of the most exotic way that you can attack people, they're going to think of everything. If you thought of it, believe me, they've already experimented on it. Mike Panzer, yeah, I agree. Electromagnetic manipulation, in other words, radar or radiation waves, and that can now come from satellites as well as from ground-based NEXRADs, as I understand it. Hurricanes always seem to circumvent MacDill Air Force Base. Yeah, that's the one in Florida, right down where the special ops trained. Well, it's close to Eglin anyway. What do you mean Dr. Hamamoto disappeared? Maybe he left the chat. What do you mean Dr. Hamamoto disappeared? Disappeared from what? From YouTube, really? All right, Love Cat. Thanks for checking in and take care. Well, McDuff does love and he does live too. So we're keeping love, life, and hope alive here at screamingospreys.com. Yeah, Jimmy, it's so glad you found our channel. You've been a boost to my, uh, you feel good. You're like emotional support, which really does count. Yeah. Yeah, because of the love of Tom, I go on. I do. I love him so much, and he was a great dad for as long as he could be. But then, probably around, yeah, well, probably after when he went to Saxon and he started to realize what deep doo doo he was in. And one day, he actually told my mother that he was just going to have to kind of just sleep there for because he had to work so hard. And that's when he was working on trying to save the country from the dope dealers that were coming in through the body bags of our honored servicemen, through their bodies itself. So they would, carve out the organs and fill it with bags of dope. Yeah, they would do that. They admitted it. Who was doing that? Who would do that and call themselves an American? I don't know. But they did it, and they're not really Americans, right? We already know from Fletcher Prouty that these folks don't consider themselves to be of any nation. They just walk right across the national boundaries and do whatever they want to do, whatever they're told to do. hmm Dictatorships can be taken down. Thank you, Mike Panzer, and will be taken down. As that's the message of Sic Semper Tyrannis. I'm. Let me get you the. Let me show you Virginia's flag. And here we go. I'm just going to share the screen so that this is recorded onto the video. It's a good reason to have share screen so that, when people later watch this, they might not know what I'm talking about. But if they see the picture, then they'll see what I'm saying. All right. So you see what we got here. This is the state seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the person standing on the top is the goddess of justice. And she has in her left hand a sword and in her right hand a pike. And down on the ground is lying the tyrant. And the tyrant has two symbols with him. Off to the right, you see the crown, the corona, right? That's the Latin word for crown. And he's wearing a tunic of the royal purple. So now we are learning something about the color purple, that we didn't learn from the movie, because this is the royal color. This is the color reserved to the emperors. And this, I think, helps us understand in a visual way what we're fighting now. You and I, we have our uh, sense of justice, our sense of being tyrannized by evil force, and that is the unjust ruler, the tyrant. And it is this seal that shows what the people, the revolutionaries of 1776 believed, that it was just to rebel against the tyrant. But it's not us that draw the sword. It is the gods themselves. It is the goddess of justice that will ultimately take down the tyrant. So all we have to do is keep the faith and do what our hearts tell us, because we're human and we have internal inalienable rights. Robert says Hitler never lost the war. Yeah, it wasn't really Hitler's war. Hitler was a puppet like everybody else. Audrey Smith says Nazis just morphed into what it is today, rampant like babies. Like rabies, yeah, rampant like rabies, exactly. Lansdale was in Dallas that day. Thank you, Mike Panzer. Very good comment. Oh, Dr. Hamamoto's YouTube page heavily curtailed and no updates. Interesting. I'll send him an email and find out what's going on. He'll be on with me, I think, next week. He's on at least once a month, and I always look forward to having Professor Hamamoto. You guys should see the the graphic art. Sorry, I don't remember the name of the medium Corky that Corky made for me. It's a beautiful black and white etching with tons of detail with both um, with George and Professor Hamamoto and myself. I'll have to show it to you guys one day. It's in the other room. But what a treasured art piece that was given to me by our own artist, Corky Goss. Yeah. Yep. I see folks are talking about the Georgia Guidestones and yeah. Yeah, this idea of them having to tell us what they're going to do, there's something to do with the Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah, however you pronounce that thing, the ancient idea that the world is really based upon certain numbers and letters and coincidences that are built into nature, so that when you run into a number like 666, and you think, whoa, wake up, there's something, I'm learning something, or I'm supposed to do something, or 333, or even 33, or all of these things associated with various secret societies they date back to the um, the Kabbalah, and that of course goes back. It all goes back to the whole Manichaean religions of the Middle East from thousands of years ago, where the idea is that we are the good guys, but the rest of the world is the bad guys, and it's good versus evil, and we have to fight them to the death. A great philosophy. If you are an emperor or an empire, keeps you on the throne, because everybody believes that you are the only hope of mankind. You are the good side, and the other side is the bad side. So we've got to win this. Yeah, Jure is back. I'm glad to see he's got a couple of new ones out. He seemed to have taken a break for about a month and a half, and but boy, he was very kind to me and did about 15-minute, 20-minute segment on McDuff, on my dad, in one of his shows about 3 months ago. A very important YouTube channel. It's called GIUREH, and completely different approach to what we're doing from what I do. I mean, he's on the ground. He's like, he's always on the scene, and he does wonderful videos where he ties the ancient Egyptian and Babylonian mystery religions into what's going on today. And he says we are still under the rule of Pharaoh. That reminds me of something I read about Douglas MacArthur earlier today. I've been deep diving on his relationships to, uh, like General Arthur Trudeau, who was the subject of my show yesterday. And I didn't know until maybe 2 days ago that General Arthur Trudeau was the engineer, the general that put together the landing boats for MacArthur's island hopping. And this was all planned back in 42. They were in Australia building these landing boats under the command of General Arthur Trudeau. And so there you have Trudeau along with MacArthur, and then his intelligence chief, his G2, was, of course, Charles Willoughby, or Baron von Weidenbach, if you prefer, who MacArthur called his little fascist. And this proximity to Trudeau, who was a far right winger and somebody that was involved in the Shikshini Knights that Golenievsky joined. This really ties in, to me, the effort of the Army military intelligence to maintain control over military intelligence in Europe, because it was the Army that set up the stay behind units. The OSS and the CIA may have had some influence on it, but the Army was the ones that, they were the Army. I mean, you can't just create an army if you're the OSS. So that struggle for the U.S. Army is saying like this is MacArthur saying, hey, I don't want any other intelligence agencies operating in my field in my theater. I have to have total control over the intelligence that's coming in here. I mean, that's the way any self-respecting general would think. This is my battle, not yours. This is my battle. You gave it to me. I'm the guy with the stars, not you, Alan Dulles. So, so much of this now is coming clear to me that what I'm seeing as two different sides, it really is the traditional military intelligence people, whom I think my dad represents, versus the Reinhard Gehlen intelligence people, who are the ones that don't actually fight wars, but only plan them and use special operations to achieve their aims. And that, of course, is the Wall Street Army. You know, so it's kind of like MacArthur's army versus the Wall Street Army, and the special operations was always part of military intelligence, but taking it away from the army, that was the business of the 1950s. So that Douglas MacArthur was dethroned, and people that supported him kind of went underground. And that's why I find reading this stuff to be so shocking, because the people that were the extreme right wingers back then were just ridiculed. Why would you care what somebody, that crazy right winger thinks or says? Why would anybody care? But now I can see that they've been called crazy. They've been written out of history because their approach to war, their approach to military intelligence is completely different from what the CIA is doing. And the CIA is planning everything around cloak and dagger, special ops. How can we topple this freely elected leader and put in a dictator that we can control? That's all they were about. Whereas the military has the traditional role of winning the war. But the CIA didn't want the wars won. They just wanted them to keep simmering, to keep going. That's one of my that just brings me right back to my mother and me sitting in the family room watching movies. And when you would get a chance to see a movie on the television, you didn't see them every day, but we were watching, I think it was The Longest Day, and right at the end of that, where the German tank commander is sees that he's not going to get the fuel, and the fuel dump is blown up, and it's the Battle of the Bulge, and they're losing. The Germans are like, oh no, we're going to lose. And so his sergeant, his good, der gute Soldat, his sergeant is like, oh, the war is over. Finally, I can go home. And he starts to walk home. But no, there's a battle still going on. And so the tank commander, the blonde, blue-eyed, there's an American actor, but just perfect for the role. He says, no. His sergeant says, what will happen now, Captain? And the captain says, the best thing ever. The war will go on. And it's a stunning end, but to the movie, but it really does encapsulate what the CIA's plans are: is to continue wars until they've conquered every single square foot of this planet. not for the government of the US. No, for their clients on Wall Street and the Bank of London and the City of London and whoever wants their services, they're willing to negotiate. So we do have a big problem here with communication with our fellow citizens, with folks thinking that we're crazy and lunatics, like they tried to call General MacArthur. And um, uh, I think of Paul Robeson all the time in the '50s too. There was a brilliant man whose voice is just the voice of the century. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous singing voice. But he was a man of the people that wanted to know everybody and traveled all around the world and learned many, many languages, sang in, I think, something like 20 or 30 languages. Uh, an athlete, scholar, a performer of great note, and a famous role of Othello in Shakespeare's uh, play about the tragedy of that great soldier. And they attacked his mind. They dosed him with LSD. They tried to drive him crazy. And they did diagnose him as crazy. And they ended up putting him into an institution. Now, to destroy a man's mind in order to stop his message from being told, you know, I believe they did that to my dad too. And you've heard me talk about it, and I won't share all of the reasons that I believe that because they're very darn ugly. But he was a great father as long as he could be a great father. And he loved us, and we loved him. And I think I'll leave it there for today. Go and see how Miss Drummer's doing and find out what the plan is to celebrate the rest of our anniversary. Thank you all so very, very much. And I'll be back with you on Monday. Thank you so much. Be sure and check screamingospreys.com for our calendar and keep in touch with me at KO Productions USA at gmail.com. I'm glad to have your comments. Bye now.